You're listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, where we share topics that will inspire business growth and help you stay ahead of advances in technology before they become mainstream. This episode is sponsored by Ingram Micro Xvantage, the game-changing platform that will transform your business potential and reshape how customers see you. Welcome to B2B Tech Talk. My name is Nina Buik, and I am delighted to have you with us today. On today's show, we're talking cybersecurity. I've got Steve Hobbs, Deputy Cyber Incident Commander at Ingram Micro. Steve has 16 years of law enforcement experience, 7 years of consulting, and 6 years in corporate information security. Steve also has 23 years experience in digital forensics, incident response, and e-discovery. He's a certified forensic computer examiner, and he's also an in-case certified examiner. Also joining us is Kevin Chew, who is currently principal threat engineer at Ingram Micro. Kevin has over 20 years of experience serving as a senior information security engineer with a demonstrated history of working in the automotive and financial industries. He's highly skilled in vulnerability management, threat intelligence, SIEM solutions, and malware analysis. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Hello, Nina.
Thank you, Nina.
It's good to have you. Steve, let's start with you because we're talking a lot about security these days. And I know you've served in law enforcement for 16 plus years. Were you fighting cybercrimes the whole time?
Actually, I was, but it was on a little different scale than what we see today. Most of the cases I worked were targeted, towards an individual suspect, not a cyber gang like we see with ransomware activities. However, the internet was still exploding in the early 2000s, and most of the cases I worked involved the internet in some way. So many of my cases did have a cyber component to them.
How much effort in today's world, how much effort and resources is law enforcement investing in fighting cybercrime?
In my opinion, I believe law enforcement is investing a lot of effort into fighting cybercrime. However, agencies can only work with the resources that they have. It's hard to get the necessary funding. It's equally hard to find good talent. I know in the corporate sector, cyber resources are still hard to find.
Sure. I think I read a stat that it's still the number one job where there's hardly anybody available, right? When you go out and look for resources, everyone's already been snapped up.
Cyber resources are in high demand.
And very high demand, which obviously speaks to the threat growing day by day. So I have a question around law enforcement. What is law enforcement's role in all of this? I mean, do they uh, um, can they put people in jail for this, or are they putting people in jail, or are they, because a lot of places are soft on crime now. Is this something that has really been taken seriously?
Oh, it is taken seriously. One of the biggest problems, at least in the United States, a lot of these attacks are coming from overseas. And when agencies, if they have control in their jurisdiction, but once you cross jurisdictional lines, not to mention trying to go to another country, they just don't have the authority to do that. And
Yeah.
not every country views cybercrime like we do. Some take it more serious, some don't seem to take it serious at all.
So now you are with Ingram Micro, a private company. How different is it working for a private company than it is working in the public sector?
So, in regards to computer forensics, they both share some of the same foundational aspects. Forensics is forensic, but one of the biggest differences I've experienced is just the scope of my work. In law enforcement, my role was a computer forensic examiner. Now, that could mean a computer, a phone, a CD, or even a PDA for those that know what that is. My job was to perform a forensic examination of that device pursuant to the scope of the search warrant. On the corporate side, I wear many hats, but ultimately, my job is to help reduce risk. whether those risks are financial, privacy, brand reputation, etc., they're all equally important. I could be leading the incident response of a ransomware attack, performing a forensic exam in a data theft case, or conducting a technical interview with the legal and HR teams. The end goal is still to reduce risk to the company.
Sounds fascinating. Kevin, let's turn to you. How did you end up working in information security?
So, I started off as a developer for a financial firm, knowing that I always wanted to get into other operations or engineering side of IT. Within about a year of my start, we realized there was a need to create a group that knew code, but also knew the operations side. So that was kind of a natural fit for me. As I was working as a liaison between the development and operations group, we started performing code assessments where we were identifying and fixing vulnerabilities. This quickly progressed into a role on the information security group. Since then, I've had the opportunity to be a part of many great incident response teams, malware analysis teams, digital forensics teams, and threat hunting teams. And that's what brings me here today.
Wow, what a career. What's the craziest thing you've seen or experienced when it comes to cyber threats?
I don't know if you'd say this is crazy, but I think two things stick out most to me. First, the fact that phishing campaigns are still highly effective. That amazes me. These attacks are getting extremely good at the attackers are getting extremely good at their craft and tricking users to open an attachment, click on a link, or unknowingly provide sensitive information. As we discussed in our presentation, the methods being used are continually changing and becoming more and more convincing, hence the continued success rate. And second, the transformation of the attacker. Attackers are now much like a business, offering services, infrastructure to launch an attack from, and even a support staff. In the presentation, we'll talk about this progression to ransomware as a service and how many of the attackers that we hear about in the news these days, they're being conducted by ransomware groups providing these services. It might not be considered crazy, but these are the things that I think we are all experiencing.
So they're highly, highly organized. And yes, those phishing attacks are highly effective. Unfortunately, I clicked on one, but I was the test one, fortunately.
Yeah.
So it's really awesome that we continue, Ingram Micro continues to provide education, awareness, and making sure that people every day are mindful of what they click on. There's speaking of transacting, we're talking about transacting on the web and on social media. Most people have a significant social media footprint, which, in some ways they feel is somewhat secure. How vulnerable are we? How vulnerable are our families and our children?
If we take caution at our actions and question the things that don't seem right, we can reduce the risk of being compromised. Phishing emails are still very successful entry point for attackers. Where, for example, if you get an email from a known contact that doesn't seem right, call them and confirm they actually sent it to you. Or if you receive an email from your bank asking to follow this link to change your password or provide some other sensitive information, call the bank and verify that. It's always better to be overly cautious. So I guess to answer your question, we are as vulnerable as we let ourselves be. We need to stay vigilant, aware, and always question suspicious activity.
That's really, really good advice. Steve, Kevin alluded to a training program, a presentation that you all have put together. This program, which is coming out soon, called Ransomware, Understanding the Threats and Mitigating Risk. What can we expect to learn?
Oh, yes. The presentation, it's just a high level view into ransomware, different types of ransomware, impacts that businesses and individuals can experience from an attack, as well as some preventative measures. We'll also discuss some of the more well known attacks that have occurred in the past. To find out more, you'll have to watch the presentation.
Very good. And this is going to be widely available. It will be on our Xvantage platform. So I hope people will be looking out for that. I do appreciate your time, gentlemen. You've provided a wealth of information. Thank you so much for joining us today on B2B Tech Talk. You've been listening to Ingram Micro's B2B Tech Talk. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode and you want to continue the conversation online, use hashtag B2B Tech Talk.